I would invite all the speakers just to switch on your cameras and also unmute yourself if it's required. And I request all the audience to feel free to post your questions in the Q&A or just raise your hands to talk. So please. So in between, I will just start with Sepe with a short question because I'm interested in the manufacturing sectors, and we are doing a lot of tasks related to grasping and aspects like that. So I have seen your research, and I was curious about the robustness and accuracy of such kind of development. So you showed us some examples, or at least in the images, with the grasping of tomatoes and some vegetables. Do you also can you give me some information about how robust is this material when you do some kind of manipulation of objects?
Yeah, the material is as robust as the normal elastomeric materials which are used. So it is true that if you start grasping different types of objects with very soft interfaces, that eventually, I mean, the goal is like to reach 1 million grips or so in these manipulators, but they fail often much sooner. Also with our materials, however, we can self-heal them. So therefore, we can increase the number of cycles quite a lot. And so these grippers, they're actually designed such as the one that I showed in the beginning, like the universal gripper, which uses granulars and a vacuum to actually have minimal control in order to grasp objects with a variety of shapes and sizes. So they're actually made so because you have a soft interface, you actually do not damage the parts that you want to grasp, and as such, you can actually reduce the position control quite a lot of your robot. So that's a bit the idea. But like I said, they have their main obstacle for their uptake in many applications is their limited lifetime.
Michelle, you have your hands raised.
Yes, thanks. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
My question goes to Robin. I was wondering, because you also said or talked about the ISO 14040, and is there any, does the EU try to somehow integrate or work together with the Norm Institute to not increase the number of norms and regulations, but try to kind of standardize that way?
Yeah. So like I discussed, for this product environmental footprint, it is based on the ISO standards. So it's basically in addition to what is already there. It's not like it's a new thing. So it also refers specifically to the ISO standard in that. And then I think I'm not aware that it was actually, I don't know if there was a process where they were thinking about making this a proper standard, because this PEF approach is also a bit in some ways criticized from the LCA community, because they say then you lose kind of, or you cannot make a comparison between products. So I guess that's also why the ISO stays on a very general level, to get into these problematic regions where you then say, okay, actually now we want to use this also to make a law based on your carbon footprint. And we say, if your carbon footprint is lower than that, then you're not allowed to replace that product on the market. So I think, yeah, so the EU approach is a bit more policy hands-on. That's why there's not a standard on it.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay, to continue the discussion, I have a question for Paula and also maybe Robin. As you've seen in our examples of LCA, we are facing the fact that we don't have access to actual data from the different products. So have you seen any database that could provide data like that? Do you think it's something that we should work as a community? More for Paula and for Robin, these batteries reference models, things like that, it's also related to that, no? Should we try to push towards a robotics? I don't know the name you used there, but the framework reference of robots or something like that? How could we ease the task of someone that wants to make an LCA of a robotic installation to have the data available, let's say? How do you see that, guys? And girls, sorry, Paula.
No problem. Yeah, I do agree, and I see the issue. I think it is a research task that has potential to maybe be more explored. Like the databases that currently exist, they also often are based on literature that's published. So if there's papers that do an SCA in a specific component and it's a reliable source, then the database will sometimes take that data and fill up the database with the data. So I think if research could be geared towards that, then the database could catch up on it and would ease the work of researchers just accessing one database. So I think it is kind of a cycle that would fulfill itself if the research would allow for more
But
transparency.
would we need to ask the providers, like the kilos of steel and the kilos of carbon and the kilos of sensors and things like that? Is that would be the inventory, no? That's database of inventory of this brand of robot, that's these raw materials and electronics and stuff like that, no? Something like that, a kind of stamp. This robot comes with that. That would be the requirement, no?
Yeah, that would be an approach, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, to add on that, I mean, you have these databases like EcoInvent, where for materials, at least you have the impacts. But I mean, it's always better to work with primary data. Yeah, just because these databases are very rough estimates for one country, for one situation in one moment of time. So it's hard to rely on that. And regarding this question of yours towards, should there be a PEF-CR on robots? I do think the more complex the product gets, the more difficult it is, because for a battery, at least you can say, okay, it always looks kind of the same. Even, of course, a consumer battery is completely different from an automotive battery. But for robots, I think it's even more this variety of which kind of what exists. And if you could say there's a standardized way of a type of robot for which you could develop kind of like an approach where you say, okay, for this type, maybe this environmental impact dimension is the most relevant, and this materials, and these are the databases you should use. I mean, this could be an option, but I do think, yeah, it's the more complex the product gets, the more difficult it is.
Yeah, just to add on that, the complexity of the products, because we have robots are manufactured by somebody else, and we are buying these robots and we are using these robots. So we cannot directly do the. I'm not sure if we can do as also mentioned by Damian, because we don't know what kind of material was used and where it was produced by Damian during his presentation. So this was somehow not clear for me. How could we, as we are buying these robots, yeah, and then we are applying it towards different applications. So how could me as like a integrator do some life cycle analysis? So I have to start somewhere in between, or should I somehow assume some data from the robot manufacturer, which I inherently cannot acquire? How should one look at this aspect? So maybe for Damian or for Paula, the question.
I don't know. What we do at the moment is actually trying to guess the weight of the different components and the weight of electronic boards, if it's active, passive, that many meters of cables. So it's really an estimate, because okay, we are roboticists. We know that they have gearboxes. A gearbox is usually made of that. So it's pure guess, but we have an estimation, and it's the best we can do at the moment. I was more thinking about trying to actually get the manufacturers on board with some new project where they could or they should actually provide data, trying to maybe scheme a project, a EU project. I don't know. I don't know the topics. I don't know the calls. I have nothing in mind. I discussed it with the EU commissioner in charge of that during the ERF, asking her and she was positive for that. So I don't know how, I don't know what, but I think that we need manufacturers to start providing data. Is there any parallel with other sectors where manufacturers actually give data, or is it everywhere in the world when you're back to a basic estimation of weight of steel in the LCAs? I mean, is there any feedback on that? That a sector would be better at transparently sharing their data? Does it exist? If anyone knows, I don't know.
Maybe I can say something to that. From my experience, or what I heard from research also through some students of mine, is that it's really hard to actually get the data because even the manufacturers that you buy stuff from buy their stuff from somewhere else. So it's like a really long chain of people, and I think it very easily gets out of hand in terms of they're not in Europe, so they're based in other countries, and then EU directives, I don't know how much impact they would have on those suppliers of materials or suppliers of electronics. And I feel it would need to be some kind of a trickle down effect that we, through policies, maybe make the bigger companies responsible for what they do and make them somehow responsible to use LCA or the PEF, so that they themselves will start asking the questions to their suppliers and maybe somehow get a trickle down effect, and then that it will spread through somewhere like that, because I think the motivation will need to be financial, mostly in some projects. Yeah, I think that's my take on it.
Okay, so keeping the time in mind, so we are already almost well in time. So I would like to conclude. So today we had a really nice discussion and presentations ranging from the life cycle analysis, different materials, the self-healing materials, and also some really cool examples showing green for robots and robots for green, and finally also the policy aspects and also some examples. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you had learned something as did I. And if you want to get in touch with the speakers, please feel free to do that. We'll also upload the presentation and the recording to the website. So please check it out and also forward to your colleagues.